Hello, everybody. I have a question. Is it okay to hate all white people? This is a question that a student asked me in 2020 while taking my expository writing seminar course. The student, we'll call him Derek, was a young black man, and he asked the question because he saw a video of a black man getting violently detained by police on a street in Canarsie, Brooklyn. Derek had not taken the video, but he was familiar with the scene. He walked on that block every time he came to class. He walked on that block every time he went to the train. He walked on that block to go to the store and to hang with his friends. He walked that block with his family. It was part of his lived experience. Derek had not taken the video, but he was feeling feelings of anger and resentment and looked to me as his instructor to help him work through those feelings. The topic of my course was broadly about engaging with difference, and there was a particular focus on the rhetoric of race, so a question about hating all white people was not exactly random. We'd already talked about the rhetoric of othering and how it can lead to people feeling isolated and helpless because society has relegated them to little more than an archetype or stereotype. We talked about the idea of American exceptionalism and how America has the tendency to tout its undeniable successes while masking its dark past. We had also talked about how exceptional means very different things across socioeconomic and racial divides. Still, I found it really difficult to find an answer to Derek's question. At this point in my career, I had been teaching for about 4 years, and I was still finding my footing as an instructor. I knew that I wanted to empower my students to think critically and independently. I knew that I wanted my students to be comfortable asking tough questions to me and to each other. I knew that the reason why I enjoyed teaching was because I was able to provide space and voice to young people, just beginning to understand and navigate the world around them. This was something I had often felt was missing when I was a student. Too often I sat in classrooms and I would listen to teachers talk endlessly about how they interpreted texts or situations, and then would quiz us on our ability to repeat back their interpretations. I knew I didn't want to be that kind of instructor. Derek's question about hating all white people continues to be one of the most challenging I've faced in my now 9 years of teaching. Before I could answer, another student, we'll call him John, asserted that it was not fair to ask that question. John argued not all white people are the same. John himself was a first-generation American whose family had immigrated here from Poland. John contested that it was not his responsibility to bear the burden of what white people had done in the United States. He was not here, and neither were his ancestors. There was a murmur in the room, and it felt like students were getting ready to choose their side in this debate. Before we continued, I asked Derek if he was comfortable showing us the video that inspired his question. He showed us. The class was shocked by the violence that we were seeing, but I noticed something. None of the 3 plainclothes officers who were violently subduing their target appeared to be white. I asked myself, what would prompt Derek to ask a question about hating all white people when there was not a single white person in that video? I decided to have a rhetorical conversation of what we mean by white. So I wrote the words white and white on the board, and I asked the students if they could identify a difference between the words. I'll pose the same question to you. Raise your hand if you could recognize the difference between these 2 words. Okay, about half. We had a lengthy discussion about the rhetorical differences between white, lowercase w, as an adjective that's used to describe people with white-colored skin, and white, capital W, as a pronoun that's used to identify the political system of whiteness that we've inherited from European colonialism. Throughout the discussion, many students shared their experiences with race and difference in the system of whiteness. Collectively, we identified that Derek's initial question about hating all white people was being attributed to white people, capital W, not white people, lowercase w. Essentially, Derek was viewing violent policing as part of the system of whiteness, and he was connecting that to all white people. John, the resisting the responsibility of a history neither he nor his ancestors participated in was responding to the same system of whiteness. He did not wish to be associated with a gross act of violence simply because he was physically white. He did not subscribe to the kind of modern policing we saw in that video. Modern policing has its roots in the slave patrols that existed in antebellum and after the Civil War. These slave patrols were designed to control the minds, bodies, and actions of Black people in order to maintain racial power dynamics. Over time, these tactics and racial undercurrents became normalized and institutionalized. They serve as the bedrock for modern policing. In my class in 2020, both Derek and John were resisting the same system, but doing so from different perspectives. Derek was responding to the effects of his lived experience because of whiteness. John, through resisting the responsibility that's imposed upon all white people, was also responding to the system of whiteness. They needed the space and rhetorical tools to express their perspectives. Had the classroom not been a safe space for them to talk through their identities, their thoughts, and their perspectives, then their feelings of resentment could have snowballed into dangerous polarization. The rampant polarization we see in society, due partially to algorithms and how we consume information, often results in a sort of political tribalism that's based on perceived identity and thought. Political tribalism has resulted in numerous acts of violence across the political spectrum. This tribalism is antithetical to a strong democratic society. My approach to pedagogy actively fights against political tribalism. The classroom must serve as a bulwark against this phenomenon. Allowing students space to contribute their experiences into the classroom, and then using those experiences as tools for collaboratively forming new knowledge is the power of asset-based pedagogy. I argue any classroom will benefit from incorporating student experiences into the learning environment. Since this incident, I began my PhD journey. While doing my own research, reading, and learning, I reflected on my time in the classroom and realized that what I was doing in my class in 2020 was utilizing a form of asset-based pedagogy called culturally sustaining pedagogy, or CSP. In 2017, H. Semi Alim and Django Perez defined culturally sustaining pedagogy as an approach that addresses the needs of a pluralistic society through perpetuating and fostering linguistic, literate, and cultural pluralism by viewing dynamic cultural dexterity as a necessary good. What all of that means is that essentially, culturally sustaining pedagogy places significant value on the experiences students bring with them into the classroom, and then encourages instructors to develop their lessons based around those experiences. CSP is only one approach to asset-based pedagogy. It has its roots as far back as 1995. In 1995, Gloria Ladson-Billings developed the idea of culturally relevant pedagogy. Ladson-Billings advocated for a continuum of teaching practices meant to acknowledge, appreciate, celebrate, and sometimes problematize the experiences students bring with them into the classroom. Similarly, in 2000, Kevin Kumashiro warned against any approach to pedagogy that is stagnant and claims to be the solution for all people at all times. Kumashiro argued that the best pedagogy is one that is constantly being contested and redefined. This approach to pedagogy requires that instructors simultaneously look backward at what has been done while looking forward at what needs to be done. CSP recognizes that education happens in a continuum, and we cannot forget where we came from as we navigate where we are going. Asset-based pedagogy requires that instructors have dexterity in their instruction. In the CSP model, instructors are facilitators of learning. They set the learning goals and the outcomes, but are considerate of and responsive to the experiences that students bring with them into the classroom. Instructors are strongly encouraged to solicit feedback from their students and then flex the instruction based on what their students are contributing. Soliciting feedback can happen in a variety of ways. Discussion boards, peer review, reflective writing, classroom discussions, group work. These are all ways that instructors can solicit feedback from their students. Each assignment serves the larger goals of communication, reflection, and contributive knowledge creation. One other key component of CSP is that literacy is understood to be the full set of experiences that we use to understand and navigate the world. This framing of literacy is much more than the traditional ability to read and write. In CSP, literacy is recognized as a cycle that consists of the knowledge a student brings with them into the classroom, the knowledge a student contributes to the learning environment, and the knowledge that they acquire through that exchange. Acquiring and sharing literacy through experience is a vital tool in our educational toolbox. In my class in 2020, I built a lesson in the moment around what my students were contributing. Their contributions did not derail instruction, they enriched it. Since my course focused broadly on the rhetoric of race and difference, student contributions around the topics of race and difference were on topic. They served as the framework for our discussion about the rhetorical differences between white, lowercase w, and white, capital W. The classroom benefited from what the students were contributing. The learning objectives were met, and it was the student contributions that helped us to achieve it. Toward the end of the semester, I asked my students to do some reflection on what they learned in the classroom. I have some testimonials about those reflections. Student A says, I always felt comfortable sharing my line of thought because I realized that I didn't have to stick with a specific statement. It made me realize that arguments are fluid. The difficulty of this class pushed me to become better. Student B says, I will start this off by being completely honest. This course kicked my ass, and I mean that in quite literally the best possible way. Being forced to think so critically about topics was so beneficial for the sake of my everyday life. Student C says, this class really makes you think and find the answers. Professor Perez doesn't give you the answers. He doesn't even give you the questions. He gives you the tools to do it. He encourages open discussion and dialogue. Really appreciated how he encouraged difference of opinion. I chose these examples because they highlight two important things. Firstly, students want to be challenged. Allowing students to contribute their experiences into the classroom does not reduce the rigor of instruction. In fact, it's even more difficult for students, especially first-year students, to do this kind of critical thinking and reflecting. This is likely because most K-12 systems are modeled after what Freire called the banking model of education in his seminal work, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. The banking model is when the instructor is viewed as the arbiter of facts, depositing information into their students, and then the students are expected to just receive that information and then repeat it back, often without critical thought. Even more modern K-12 systems that include critical thought and response are often restricted by a curriculum that's imposed on them from administrators whose priorities may be split between balancing effective pedagogy with appeasing parents, all lawmakers, or statistics that affect funding. A second point the testimonials I've chosen underscores is that students want to be in conversation with each other in a safe environment where they feel like their opinions are valued and respected. In my class in 2020, students challenged each other. I facilitated the lesson and arbitrated the conversation when it was necessary. But the discussion was primarily student-led and built on the assets of their own experiences. They engaged with really difficult subject matter through the lens of their own understanding. They contributed their experiences to the classroom. They felt acknowledged and validated. They respected each other, most importantly, even when they disagreed. So, what was the answer to Derek's question about hating all white people? Well, internally, I was startled, but I was also honored that he would ask me that question in earnest. I respected his candor. Surprisingly, if you haven't noticed, I'm physically a white man. But my student felt very comfortable asking me a question about his feelings about white people. To Derek, I said, I could not control how he felt, but I could help him work through what was prompting him to ask that question. I advised that hating an entire group of people could be harmful to him and to the people that he loves. I invited him to share his experiences into the classroom and then used an asset-based approach to foster a constructive conversation with all of the students by inviting them to also share their experiences. By utilizing any asset-based pedagogy, instructors are able to train their students and to guide their students to be thought and opinion leaders among their peers, and hopefully within their communities. For me, that's the reason why we're all here. We're here to train and develop the next waves of thought and community leaders. I encourage instructors to incorporate their student experiences into the classroom in whatever way that they can. Lived experience is one of the great assets we carry with us every day. Let us learn from our students so that we can be responsive to their needs while providing them with the tools that they require for their own success. It is our duty and responsibility as educators, as humans. Thank you.